real dandy today, folks. A guy who, like me, loves the old gambling stories. But unlike me, this guy has a PhD. He's smart. He loves the little anecdotes, and the wide world of gambling history provides a ton of fabulous stories. Loves the Old West, from the days of Doc Holliday to current times with Phil Ivey, backroom poker halls to the Rio and the World Series of Poker. Oddities, tidbits, entertaining tales of the past. This guy loves all of that, and he documents it too. Is the author of Famous Gamblers, Poker History, and Texas Stories, and the reviews have been absolutely outstanding. From Lubbock, Texas, the land of Buddy Holly, Johnny Hughes joins us today. Johnny, thanks for being a high roller, man.
Okay, it's good to be talking with you, Derek.
Now, you played poker with Buddy Holly, is that correct?
I played poker with Buddy before and after he got famous. It wasn't much to it. I thought I was running poker games. I started out to be a professional gambler at a very early age, and you mentioned PhD. I just got through writing about, I learned psychology. My PhD is in organizational psychology from the old gamblers, and then later I learned it from professors who put big words on it. And the old gamblers were better, smarter, and the thing I'm the most proud of is the years I spent as a professional gambler. I will just mention about Buddy. He was the nicest guy, and I met him through poker. Through poker, you'll make the best friends of your life. I'll mention many famous people, and I met every single one of them through poker, except Elvis.
What was Buddy Holly like as a player? Was he good?
No, but Joe B. of the Crickets, he said Buddy was generous. He didn't care. But the thing is, when he got back off, his first big tour, they didn't really have money. And I thought they did, and Buddy and I rode over to my game in his Cadillac, and two of the other Crickets played, and they wouldn't play over 50-cent limit, which was, in other words, that's about the end of that dang story. We played in the quarter limit, so I've only played 2 limits with Buddy. But he was just an incredibly nice person. He was 2 years older than me, and he'd stop and talk to me in the halls and stuff. And the thing that sticks out about him was he was really nice. Buddy and I both appeared on a kids show when I was about 7, and my singing partner was Nicky Sullivan, who was later a Cricket with Buddy, and we were on the same radio show, broadcasting live and for prizes. And we'd get this boxes of orange juice concentrate or lime juice concentrate, and it was hard to even carry the crap home. But Buddy was he was just a big star around Lubbock his whole dang life. Had his own radio show, recorded a couple of stations. He was just a great guy. But they went out on the road their first time with an all-black groups, in the bus, Little Richard, and they'd shoot dice and play poker. And musicians on the road back in the older days did them some gambling.
Well, you talk about gambling from an early age. Tell us some stories about some of the old-time gamblers, and you talk about how street smart they are. How knowledgeable were they? They always had the edge, it seemed. These guys were characters among themselves, weren't they?
Oh, you bet. They were the greatest characters, and that's why I chose them to write about. Titanic Thompson said, to be a winner, you have to feel good about yourself and have some kind of advantage. I write about a guy named Curly Cavitt, and that's really the reason we're talking this morning, is I happened to meet him. I already wanted to be a professional gambler. I come from 4 generations of them, and I write about my own family, some of my stories, including fiction, or about my great-uncles who were road gamblers during the Depression, very colorful folks. And I met Curly Cavitt, and he taught me gambling and psychology. I just finished a psychology article, and basically what he taught me is in 2 parts, math and psychology.
Talk about the importance of psychology in a poker game or in a gambling match of any kind. You're trying to one-up your opponent, and if you can get into their head, you've already got the edge. If you got the math too, that helps.
Well, yeah, you always have to have the percentage advantage. A real gambler, and we use the word gambler differently because we meant like doctor, lawyer, professional, does not. I don't bet on anything but me playing poker and the stock market. I don't bet on craps. I don't bet on roulette. I I wouldn't put a quarter in one of those slot machines because somebody from Texas might see me. I would just be so ashamed. But Curly taught me that. And then he taught me something I'm writing about called your inner poker face or your calm spot. And you always return to your calm spot. I may even write a whole book about this one concept, but I don't care whether I win or lose on any given day. And I don't celebrate, which I think is as bad as whining. I don't tell bad beat stories. I don't believe in the damned word tilt. And I think luck's a subject for the suckers. And they taught me that. But basically, and I have lost during the dot-com bubble, I lost a couple $100,000. And it didn't make any more difference to me than a hot fudge sundae.
So what's your approach then, Johnny? Is it simply, hey, this is my profession, I've got to have the edge, I'm going to have the edge over the long run, so the day-to-day grind, ups and downs, I can handle that, because if I've got the long-run edge, I'm going to win.
That's exactly right, Derek. In other words, gambling's in two parts. There's the wager, the bet, 4th Street, and then there's the outcome. And see, this is not just about poker. This is life. I'm way better off than most people psychologically because I've had ups and downs from the very start. If I dropped a pot of hot coffee and a half on my foot, I wouldn't feel anything about it except some burning on my foot. I don't care. But at the shop, I played at the same gambling joint for 35 years, and my role models, I met Johnny Moss when I was 19 years old. I was on the road with Curly Cavitt. We're riding in a car, and he's telling me all this stuff. And Johnny Moss was playing against Sarge Ferris, another poker Hall of Famer over in Longview, Texas. And Curly was a cheater. And there aren't very many cheaters in poker, and I don't cheat. But I'm a great bird dog, meaning I can catch people cheating. And
well, a good gambler always can, can't they?
No. There's certain things, and I'll talk about them if you'd like.
Sure.
I've written an article about cheating, too. But through Curly, I met those two poker Hall of Famers. And then I went to Las Vegas, and I met Benny Binion, using Curly's name.
Well, listen, before we get to the guys that you hung around with, the guys you know, I want to get back to that concept, the article you wrote on cheating in Bluff Magazine. There are many ways to cheat, aren't there? Tell us a few and why it's important to spot them.
Okay, and I'll continue with Curly because he's the one.
Absolutely.
And there were really 3 great cheats I knew of and write about. Tommy Thomas, Titanic Thompson's son, and I caught him cheating in a huge game. Curly Cavitt, and Titanic Thompson himself, and they all knew each other. Curly had a whole closet full of cheating devices, mark cards, loaded dice, a hold-out machine, these funny sunglasses, and ways, dice shaving machine, a way to make what's called a light. And you're talking about ways to catch cheating. There was a recent cheating scandal in Austin, Texas, involved a personal injury lawyer, very wealthy, but he cheated several of the underground games out of thousands, if not tens of thousands of dollars with a new kind of cheating. And I'm kind of surprised they didn't catch him quicker. But they had cards with barcodes in the cards. And he was a confederate of these dealers, and they would bring the cards, which is ridiculous. I never heard of that. You know, Austin's not too smart. And he had on these little tiny earphones, and he had a device that looked like a cell phone laying in front of him. And he needed to sit in the 5 seats straight across from the dealer. He didn't have much range on this thing, you know, but it would read the cards for him. And he would sit in with 30,000 cash and watch the 2-5 game. And we play 2-5 here and 2-5-10, and there's more money on the table than you'd think, you know. But this went on a while before they caught him. And now they've cleaned up everything in Austin. There's a couple of 3 ways to cheat with cell phones. If you allow cell phones on the table, I think you ought to take your money outside the joint and set fire to it in a little pile, because it'll glow and you'll have something. Damn sucker, see? There's 2 ways to cheat. You see the top of the card through marks stops, dents, finger waves, and you see the bottom of the card through some type of mirror or shiny device, be it a ballpoint pen, or they used to have them in the bowl of a pipe. One old boy in Vegas would put about 8 pounds of keys out on the table, stretching out about a foot. And you're thinking, God almighty, are these people? I'm in a room full of people that don't know this. And he'd do it every day, you know. There's a thing called the light Curly played. And the first thing you do is you walk up to the table, you start looking at their hands for bandages and maybe manicures. And you take a light bulb and they spray it with this mirror substance. Then they break it and get the tiny little rectangle or something, just a little bitty piece. They put it under a bandage on their finger with a little hole in it where there's a mirror under as they deal. And they probably won't play low ball. Texas Hold'em, No Limit, is the hardest game to cheat.
Really? I didn't know that.
And as I talk about cheating, I want to emphasize that it's very rare. And it's very rare historically. The best gamblers over time, all these gamblers I write about were square gamblers. The guys, Swider, Bad Masterman, those guys didn't cheat. They killed cheaters at times. And Titanic Thompson was a famous cheater. In my book, I'm going to mention again, Famous Gamblers, Poker History, and Texas Stories. You can get it on Amazon or several places. And especially electronically, you know, Kindle, Nook, Google iBook, Sony iBooks, a whole bunch of people are selling it. Anyway, Curly taught me all about cheating, and you've got to watch for that mirror type stuff, and you got to watch for any kind of dents and marks. And we now play with plastic cards. Those old paper, when I ran poker games, I'd buy 2 decks of B-brand cards every day, and you open them in front of the players, and you smell at the bottom to see if there's new glue, because, you know, a deck's been gaffed. In the movie Cincinnati Kid, they did that, but they must have hit the cutting room floor. They didn't explain why they were smelling in the decks. And I would teach the people how to look for marks. And I want everybody, and I'd let them take the decks home. I had a magnifying glass sitting on the table. In other words, the house man has to prove he's honest. And a gambler's reputation is just as important as his suitcase and his pistol. He can't get off on the road without a reputation. If you're a cheater, you're barred, or worse, they may shoot you, you know. And so when Johnny Moss was playing, he was a great bird dog. You're pretty sure there's no cheating. When those really biggest gamblers sit down, they're not cheating because they know everything I know. And it's just really hard to do. Really, really hard to do, you know. But the way I met Benny Binion the first time, I was looking for him, of course. I was in his joint. I was playing bridge there with 3 guys, which is stupid. I go up and get 3 strangers to gamble with me. You know, I just turned 21. And they were cheating me, and I was running up the tab to them, you know. And I stopped them and said, hey, I can't pay this. We'll have to stop now, you know. I'm running out of money. And Benny Binion walked up behind me and said, you don't have to pay them anything. Then he got me a job across the street at Golden Nugget playing for Bill Boyd, playing poker for the house. And Bill was another poker Hall of Famer, and he taught me. And when we talked earlier, Derek, about the attitude and stuff, right. I'm observing all these guys. I played poker with Amarillo Slim.
I mean, you had a great teaching around. You were learning from the greats.
But I was doing it really on purpose. In other words, I'm a bright guy. That's when other people wanted to be engineers and crap. I wanted to be a gambler. And there were hardly any books. I'd read Arnold Rothstein's biography, a guy I write about, when I was like 19. And there was one book called The Education of a Poker Player. One of my good friends was Bill Smith, the world champ in 1985. And he was at some final tables, terrible drunk, ruined his life to the alcohol. But I learned a lot from poker just watching his plays at Hold'em, his re-raises and his semi-bluffs. And, you know, the style I play right now, I picked up from those old gamblers.
Well, all these old gamblers, let me ask you what the one thing they had in common is. I mean, what makes a great gambler?
Well, clothes. about that. People on the final tables often look like hobos on the streets. You want to hand them a little something. They're hungry, and they don't shave for 3 days because that's stylish. And they vanish after one season. They're real popular with these magazines for a while. Then you never hear from them again except on Facebook trying to get staked. Old gamblers, starting with Wyatt Earp, Doc Holliday, and those guys, to Titanic Thompson, especially in the 20s, to the gamblers I turned out with in the late 50s, they were immaculately clothed. They really dressed well. 2 of the big movies about gambling, The Hustler with Paul Newman and The Cincinnati Kid, they both have grooming for the old professional gambler as a metaphor for being cool and having that confidence.
Yeah, being the guy with the big stack, the bankroll in his pocket. Wasn't Crandall Addington a well-groomed guy?
Well, he was the dandy. He's my book has great reviews from Crandall Addington, Doyle Brunson. I have a letter in there from Doyle, and we're correspondents. They're best friends and Poker Hall of Famers. And Doyle was reading my book again this week and wrote on Facebook about it on Facebook. His daughter did. But he is my best source. And he was known for dressing real well. I was there, at the early World Series, and I was pulling for him and knew him and interviewed him and stuff 30 years ago. I don't know. What is it? More. And I write to him quite a bit now. And he's the single best source for my book. When I wrote about Curly Cavitt, the guy I talked about, I sent it to Crandall, and I sent it to Doyle and told him, I'm going to quote for you guys. And Doyle said that Curly was the consummate gambler, the best gambler he ever knew, because he didn't have any leaks. And Doyle said, we all have leaks except Curly. That was really true. And Crandall spoke of how mysterious Curly was. He said he'd just show up out of nowhere, get the money, and be on the road again.
He always got the money.
Oh, yeah. And it was never broke. And he stayed on the road till he was about 80. He'd come watch us play at the shop and not even play because he couldn't cheat. He didn't have any, and he taught me this, and I'm quoting him a lot. He was my guru. He'd say, either take the best of it or the worst of it. I wouldn't flip you for 50 cents at any gamble in me. I watch the stock market go up and down, and actually when it's a down day, I don't watch. But I don't care, and that was the main thing they taught me. Sitting at the table in the shop, everybody's pretty well dressed, and the places we played were shitty, dusty and barns and backs of car lots, and the old shop was this old cement floor and used furniture and crap like that. You didn't want to appear wealthy because of the law, but they dressed real well, and the businessmen were trying to attract to play with us. They got to think you're high class. They got to think, you've got some money. And I would buy clothes every time I'd win, which was kind of stupid because I'd go broke in the summertime and have a bunch of real nice winter clothes. But there was an attitude. When somebody lost all their money, they would not whine or say bad beat. And there aren't bad beats. There's mathematics. People make straights and flushes. And if you can't handle that, you probably cry at red lights, you sucker. They would have a saying that he almost cares. He don't care. Ask him if he cares. If you lost everything you had in the world. And when I was young, I'd play with everything I had in the world on the table because I was playing with guys that played at the World Series later and all of that. And they would have their money up there too, but if we went broke, somebody'd always stake us.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a fascinating talk we've got going on right now. Johnny Hughes is on the line, and he is the author of Famous Gamblers, Poker History and Texas Stories, available on Amazon. His website's johnnyhughes.com. Wonderful tale so far. Johnny, you mentioned a number of big names already. Let me throw out a few more names, and if you can just give me a sentence or two about each, I'd love that. Wyatt Earp.
Well, Wyatt Earp was a professional gambler his whole life. You can Google Wyatt Earp Bluff Europe. I wrote a 2 or 3 part series. The movies are false. There are 55 false movies about him. And I focused on his life after that shootout At the end of the shootout and stuff, he and Doc fled Arizona as fugitives from justice and couldn't come back. They weren't town-taming cops. They were professional gamblers. White was never a marshal. He was an assistant or something. But he was a good poker player. He gambled all his life. And his great friends were Canadian Bat Masterson and Doc Holliday and Luke Short. All of the most famous gamblers knew each other. They were square gamblers and they were well-dressed.
That was my next guy, Canadian Bat Masterson.
Boy, he's the hardest one. I love Bat Masterson better than any of the rest. He was a man of more ethics. He saved lives. The rest of them took lives. And he was a good professional gambler from an early age. And all those guys I've mentioned were nationally famous in their 20s.
Wow.
And had that fame their whole lives. That was incredibly famous. A New York magazine said he'd killed 26 men by the time he was 27. He killed one.
Wow.
And that was all he ever killed.
And why was he famous? Just because he was a great gambler?
No, for being a gunfighter, which he really wasn't.
Oh, I got you. Okay.
And he was a friend of Wyatt. He was elected sheriff of Dodge when he was 23, and he was kind of involved in politics and stuff. And he toured the gambling circuit playing high-stakes poker in Colorado and Leadville and the boom towns. These guys moved from boomtown to boomtown. In Mobeetie, Texas, he met Ben Thompson, and he killed his only man there. And Ben Thompson was a big gambler out of Austin, Texas. These were incredibly loyal friends. They put their life and business on the line for each other, and but they were all professional gamblers first, and they dealt faro. And because of those big names, they could always get a job for the fanciest casinos in any town. Next question.
All right, Elvis Presley.
Well, that's my most interesting, in a way, stories. I didn't start gambling until I was 8 or 9, and I didn't.
Oh, really? You waited till you were about 8 or 9, huh?
Yeah. I didn't get a gun until I was 12. And I didn't go to a whorehouse or start bootlegging until I was 14.
Wow, 14? Why'd you wait so long?
That's how I met Elvis. He played here, and he knew Buddy, and he and Buddy played together, and he was here 7 times before he got famous, and he was here with a man named Bob Neal, his manager, his first manager. He only had 2, and Bob Neal became very instrumental in my life. But anyway, I met him when I was 15 years old, and they were playing at this Pontiac showroom, Buddy and Elvis, and they wanted to get some beer. You know, Elvis didn't drink, but the rest of them. And I told him I can do that. My friends would steal beer out of garages. I was too nervous to steal and too lazy to work, so I became a gambler. And I'd sell it at the Cotton Club, this historic and famous club. And so Elvis came out there. He's playing out there with Buddy Holly. And he stood by his Cadillac bragging about his sexual exploits and all. I've written an article entitled, but people Google, Elvis Presley, Buddy Holly, Joe Ely, and the Cotton Club. But anyway, I met those guys, and then many years later, 20-something years later, I started to manage Joe Ely, a singer here, a singer-songwriter from Texas. And we got contracts with with MCA Records, and I was with him for 3 albums on MCA Records. And I called Bob Neal, Elvis's old manager, who was by this time president of the biggest booking agency in Nashville, the William Morris Agency there. And he'd been instrumental in careers of Johnny Cash and Johnny Rodriguez. He was just a hell of a big wheel. And I called out there and said I met him before, told his secretary, I met him at the Cotton Club in Lubbock, Texas, when I was bootlegging, and met him and Elvis, and I'd like to talk to him. And he came right on the phone and became my best friend in the music business. I was there about 3 years, and he coached me. When I was young, I'd go up, and I think all your young listeners should do this, go up to the successful older people and ask them questions, and you'll get instruction, because it's just a natural intergenerational thing. They like to do it. And he helped me in the music business and set up our strategies. Was just a great guy.
You know, it's funny you mentioned that, Johnny, about the advice, because when I was in college taking broadcasting, one of the instructors there told me, find a broadcaster you think is good and imitate them until it becomes your own. That's basically it. Find the older guys, the guys who have done it, the guys who are successful, the guys who you want to emulate, and copy them, fake it until you make it. Eventually, it will become your own style, and then other people, the youngers, will be following you.
Yeah, I played bridge and traveled bridge tournaments. I was actually on the road more for bridge than poker because Lubbock was such a poker center. Every single world champion played here, like Bobby Baldwin, Doyle Brunson, Bill Smith. I played with Bill Smith, Amarillo Slim, Sailor Roberts, Treetop Strauss. All these guys came to the shop, our home game that lasted about 35 years. But when I played bridge, I went to Oswald Jacoby, the best known, he's in my book, he's the best known card player in America and author of every kind of book, and I'd sit behind him and watch him, and I'd ask him questions. I later was invited to appear on television with him in a bidding contest, me and Mother against some other people. As soon as the hand was over, give a little talk about it, and she'd tell him he's wrong and jump on him. She was at her table presence was trash talking and mean, and she talked. I'm real nice now, but you have to be nicer and all of that. But I'd ask these older people and other bridge experts and poker experts, and it just happened, see, that the guys I knew around poker were Johnny Moss. I saw Johnny Moss over there in Longview, and then I was playing a bridge tournament in Oklahoma City, and he was there. He came to watch me play because I was playing with this gambler from up there. And then I went to Odessa, Texas, where his home game was, and played him there. We played bridge. He spotted me, and he gets up a prop bet, and me and him take on these guys and lost every rubber. See, we didn't see any picture cards. It was just low ball, And we played low ball. We did play low ball, and we played hold'em, and I lost at all of them. And so I was traveling with Bill Smith and Tennessee Longgoody, who just passed away. Doyle mentioned that. And we lost because that was the toughest game in America, And West Texas had all of the early world champions, and I knew them, year after year. And I never entered tournaments much, but I was there at the World Series. I flew out with Amarillo Slim in 1975. He hardly ever told the truth about anything.
He was quite a character, God save his soul.
Yeah, he was. But he was just made for that show business thing.
Well, let's talk about the World Series of Poker for a bit. I know Amarillo Slim was the guy who won the first one, the champion, went on the Tonight Show, but it really did start with the famous prop bet out in front of Binion's, with Benny Binion getting Nick the Greek Dandelos to face off against Johnny Moss in an epic 5-month marathon match. What was that like in those days?
Well, I've written about that and done a great deal of research about it. Bluff Europe, I've written for Bluff Europe every month for 3 years, and you can Google Johnny Hughes and Nick the Greek, or Nick the Greek and Bluff Europe would be better to get this story. Basically, it wasn't a marathon, and it wasn't even all heads up, and at times the game moved out to the strip a little, But in 1949, Nick the Greek had the worst year of his life, and he went broke. And I believe he stayed broke the rest of his life.
Wow.
And he was a shill. I saw him in Vegas when I mentioned all those Hall of Famers. I forgot some. But I saw him shooting dice at the Sands, and he basically worked for the joint by that time in his old age. But there are several critics who say this match did not take place because it wasn't in the newspapers. There was only one mob-controlled newspaper, and they didn't report gambling winnings. And that one newspaper didn't even report that Benny Binion owned the Horseshoe.
Wow.
Because of his criminal record. They said he was a restaurant manager. When he had a license hearing for the place, I've written a short story about that. It's in my book. And the story itself, he had a guy front for him. The lieutenant governor and the mayor spoke for old Benny, but he didn't even tell folks he owned the place. But Nick the Greek lost around $2 million to Johnny Moss and Benny over a 5-month period of time. Other people played in the game a $10,000 buy-in, but none of them, mostly it was these two guys, you know. Nick the Greek was a sucker. He lost to Arnold Rothstein every time they played. But Johnny Moss, these guys that are writing in magazines now, they're trying to say Johnny Moss was broke and worked for clubs in Vegas and the match didn't even take place. Johnny made it up. Well, Benny talked about it. Jack Binion talks about it. Crandall Addington, Doyle Brunson, you know, they all believe it. I told you I met Johnny when I was 19.
Right.
I already heard this story before he got famous.
Really?
It was one of the most famous stories. He won all his money, and Nick the Greek was the most famous gambler in America. But anyway, Nick the Greek went broke that year. And in the latter part of the year, Nick the Greek played against Ray Ryan, a real flashy, huge-time gambler. And this was they talk about what didn't get in the newspaper. None of this got in the newspaper either. Nothing much got in the newspaper, owned by the mafia. But Ray Ryan and him played outdoors, low ball and gin rummy, and Ray could play everything. Ray was the Stu Unger of his day, great player, but he was cheating. And the way he was cheating is they were sending him over. That means you see somebody's hand and signal. A guy with binoculars could see Nick the Greek's hand, and he sent messages to a device worn on Ray Ryan's waist. And you always got to really protect your hand, and you got to protect it from the eye in the sky.
No kidding.
You just make a little tent with both hands, and then you peek down there. That's why Hold'em's so great. You know, you need to see your whole cards before anyone else does. That's one of the principles.
Hi, Rollers. We are on the line with Johnny Hughes, telling us a lot full of wonderful stories today, and we do appreciate it. Johnny, I got a few more questions for you. While I think of it, I want to ask you about cheating in online poker vis-a-vis the Russ Hamilton debacle where he cheated millions out of players and friends even. Had that MasterCard account where you could see the whole cards. What a guy. The 94 world champion ripping fellow players off. Anyway, what do you think about online poker? Is it safe?
Well, I wouldn't trust it. I don't play online poker. In general, that was an isolated kind of incident, and it certainly illustrates something, as I was telling you. Cheaters give themselves away. I played against Titanic Thompson's son, and he was cheating me. He could have a cold deck, right over his heart. I had ace-king. It came ace and 2 deuces. And I'm reading him body language, and I got him, and I'll go all the way. And on 5th Street, I move in. And now he starts studying whether to call or not. He can't raise. I don't have any more chipsies. And he had his hand up to his cheek. And he had a card under that hand, and he came down real fast and switched whole cards. Now, you see something strange, and I didn't see what's called drippings, the edge of a card or any. In other words, I just knew people don't move their body parts that fast except in baseball. And now he can call me, and he's got 2 aces in the hole. In other words, suddenly he's got the nuts, and they give themselves away with just like the guy in Austin, and especially Russ. The example I've used this same example, Derek, when I'm talking cheating, as to how damn dumb they are.
Yeah, absolutely. Come on, that's just greed, buddy.
I will mention one thing I should have mentioned. People play what's called a slug. They take the last flop or 3 or 4 cards and put them on the top or bottom and shuffle without disturbing them. And then after the cut, they can kind of tell whether they're in somebody's hand or whether they're going to be on the board. You can even do it with 1 or 2 cards, the aces. You kill the ace on the bottom, and now you know where it is.
Who's the best mechanic you've ever seen?
Titanic Thompson's son and Curly. I've seen 2 of the best.
Really?
And his son was probably better than him. But he had a pistol on his ankle. And if you catch somebody cheating, I wrote this article in Bluff. The editors will pick out some little part to highlight. I just love that in the artwork, and I do it every month. But it said, if you catch a cheater, don't do anything, just leave. And gamblers have signals, various the old gamblers. One's called the thumb sign. And the thumb sign is if I walk behind you and run my thumb across your back, one line, that means there's danger or somebody's cheating or I'm a-leaving and you should too. And by the way, husbands and wives can do this at a party if people are bored.
It's a very good tip. Thanks for that, Johnny.
Another good gambler signal is we take a quarter and tap on the glass because, real loud knocks are either the police or the robbers. I've been robbed, I've been arrested, and I've been arrested with some of those famous gamblers I was telling you about, and the police got out all the pictures. And all the times I was arrested for gambling, they never drew their guns, and they never handcuffed anybody, and they didn't put our names in the newspaper. We were treated really good.
Back in the day, you hear about these crazy gaming halls, in the basements. It's shady, it's kind of sketchy. You don't want to go in there, but that's what the rogue gamblers did. And I heard a quote, not sure who it was from, but it was easy to win the money. It was tough to get out of town with the money.
That sounds like Doyle. But where we played, it was, they made us outlaws. I think of myself as an outlaw, even though I don't break any laws. And we didn't. We were the elite. The road gamblers and professional gamblers were the elite of kind of like the outlaws. All those pimps and crap tell people they're gamblers, And the shop was open. Lubbock was one of the few places that had totally open poker. In other words, if you were the worst old road gambler, you could come play. Curly could come play. But we all knew about cheating, and we were dangerous. The reason I'd never cheat is I was scared to death of those guys, and they were scared of me.
And there is honor among thieves, is there not? I mean, you don't want to get caught cheating by Doyle. He'd shun you.
Well, that's exactly. Derek, you're very perceptive about that because the guys that came to the shop wanted the respect of other people. And the rule was, like Curly and them, they would go out on the road and cheat. But in Lubbock, they would not cheat, because if you get caught in some other town, your reputation hurt. So what, compared to your hometown? Curly went to the Democratic Convention in Oklahoma, 1952, before my time, and he got caught running a big dice game, and they found marked cards, dice shaving machine, all this in the trunk of his car, and there was a picture in newspapers all over the country of the trunk of Curly's car. But when they got back to Lubbock, they're fading real high dice game for the oil men and stuff. They just put a bowl of red dice on the table, and the players pick them a couple of dice, and they didn't even touch the dice. Anybody worked there, because you don't want people to think you cheated. But Curly had kind of burned himself out around here. I mean, people, if you just ever cheat, you're barred. 4 times when I entered college, an old gambler staked me when I was broke. And one day I'm broke, and the next day I got a semester of college going here, And I cherish them. I mean, my parents left town, and these old guys helped me out, and I could always get stake money from them. And gamblers do have kind of like hearts of gold. Poker players are better at psychology just naturally because we study ourselves and we study others. In other words, we have to confront psychology, and every poker player, regardless of their educational level, does that. And poker players are pretty good people. But we wanted the honor and the respect of the other guys, so you kept your word and you paid your debt.
Hey, who's the greatest politician gambler of the old days? I know a lot of politicians, Richard Nixon even liked to gamble. Did you ever play with politicians?
Well, of course, what came to mind immediately was Benny Binion, because he controlled the politicians in Dallas, Texas, and was controlled by them. They had a crooked system, and he was boss gambler. All of the different, people there had to pay him a tax. And then when he went to Las Vegas, he was pretty tight with the federal judge and the sheriff and all of those people. Whereas Benny really always had more kind of politics than anybody. But I've never played with any particular politicians. I know that Nixon made his money for his first campaign playing poker. George Wallace, the old racist, he was a real good poker player. Roosevelt played low-stakes poker all right away from where he did those fireside chats. He even had poker chips in his hand sometimes, and you could hear him. He had a low-stakes poker game that included his girlfriend and his wife's girlfriend and members of the cabinet. Truman was a good poker player, and he got Churchill to play with him and beat him, just to show him. But Truman kept a poker game going. Obama was supposed to be a good poker player, and he used poker as a networking experience, Poker's the greatest way to meet people, and you form really good friends, but we compete with each other. The same guys, they tell me, get there on time, help us start the game, you be really, really nice to the recreational players, light player suckers.
Yeah, there is nothing worse than a guy at the table with a few $2,000 chips in his pocket, on tilt, throwing money away, betting every hand like crazy, and some guy at the other end of the table pisses him off because he happened to get beat in a hand. You know what, buddy? He's a terrible player. Be nice to him. Keep him in the game. You're going to get that money at the end of the night, aren't you? You got to keep the suckers in the game.
See, I don't believe in showing emotion in poker, and the way to do that is don't feel any. I don't care whether a guy hits it straight or not. My God, it's been happening to me since I was 13.
Exactly, but if it does happen, definitely don't condescend the guy for playing bad.
The same, even worse, is celebrating. You're celebrating his loss, and if you'd done that, in other words, the old guys, it was a cultural thing. They reinforced the norms and the taboos and the values. They just flat tell you how to act, these older gamblers would. And Curly would tell you how to, psychologists tell you what the big word means. The old gambler would tell you how to act and how to feel. And if you feel that way, it's really easy to act that way. In other words, if you have the inner poker face, the outer poker face just becomes natural. I'm an actor, and you are too. I send tells, and I know the things that kind of work. If somebody picks up their hand at the end of the hand, it means they're about to throw it away. And if I want to call, I'll say, throw that one away, and we'll let you have the next one. They lay their hand back down because they wonder what that means. So all you've done is started them back to the decision process. If they're about to call me, they study though, and you keep quiet, and then they start to move their hand to make a call. I'll say, I'm a poor old man, don't you raise me. And now they stop and think, what does that mean? Because they weren't thinking about raising me. And in other words, I can use psychology, and one reason is I'm not afraid. Curly would say, a scared gambler's like a jealous pimp.
Hey, listen, we're on the line with Johnny Hughes, author of Famous Gamblers, Poker History, and Texas Stories, www.johnnyhughes.com. Johnny, a couple of more questions real quick. You are officially now my longest guest ever at 48 minutes and counting. But, hey, 48 minutes that have flown by, buddy. It's been great. Archie Karras and Stu Unger. Talk about those guys.
Well, I watched Stu Unger play, and I don't know anything special about Archie. Stu Unger was a really great card player and had this brilliant card sense, and he was the biggest dang sucker ever came to Vegas. He smelled bad. I was covering the World Series in 1990, and I think he got to the final table and didn't show up.
Unbelievable.
And I was there in 97 when he won it for the work last time, and that was a very good, hopeful, upbeat thing, changed a lot of us. He taught me something about psychology there.
What was that?
He had a daughter, and he would put the picture of his daughter behind his chips, and I have a goddaughter, and she's everything to me. She's my full partner, gambling every day on the stock market and silver and other different things. And he would put her picture back there to remind him it's real money. And I have to, to me, money doesn't mean the same thing it does to other people. Since you're a foreign audience, I found $45,000 yesterday in a lockbox. I didn't know it. There's some bonds in there. I thought they were 70,000. I thought they were the kind of bond where you pay $5,000 and they mature toward 10.
Right.
And they were really the kind you pay 10 and they keep it going up. My mother ended up with some cash. We don't know where she got it, but she was a con artist. And we joked we'd put on her tombstone, she never got caught. But anyway, of course, you can use this. You can break this up any way you want to. I was on another show where I have the record at 2 hours. But I really enjoy rambling around like this. What other questions did I leave unanswered?
No, listen, you got them all, man. What I want to ask you now is, in one sentence, can you pinpoint the characteristics that make up a good gambler? And in one word, who's the greatest gambler you ever saw?
Well, you have to, it's a game of mathematics and psychology, and the psychology is the most important. It's self-control, intelligence, and self-esteem, self-efficacy. I've written an article about that. That means, do you know where you stand? Do you know your own skill level? The smaller games and the mid-sized games are easier to beat than the big games. And I don't believe in the terms running bad or on tilt, you know. Those are excuses. I wrote my PhD dissertation in the area of self-efficacy and self-esteem. And when I taught at university, I used poker all the time in the psychology of poker. By mastering this inner poker face and the calm spot in my head, that transfers to other things you do in life. There's no luck in poker. Everybody gets the same cards over time, but life is full of it. Life's full of luck and unexpected. The drunk driver hits your car, all these things, and you have to know in advance that you're going to be buffeted by storms. When you sit down at the poker table, what tilt is when if the folks get them a hand, we always knew this. We start out real slow with the big producers and get them off loser. And you get a rich guy off loser, he'll go off on a bigger number because he just wants to win over you. He doesn't want to. It's not about the money, it's about beating you in competition. The greatest was Minnesota Fats and Titanic Thompson in what's called a conversation. The bet itself. How do you get, what do you say to get a spot or give a spot or do the line at boards or whatever, but talk. And so the bet is won or lost before it's made. The wager itself. When I watch TV and they're playing Hold'em and they get the money all in to go to a commercial and crap, I change stations. I don't care what comes. And in life, I don't really care. You get yourself ready to say, I don't really care what happens to that old pot, because over time, I'm the house. If you want to play dice, you have to shoot and I fade. If you want to play blackjack, I deal, you play. In other words, I've worked at dice and I've dealt blackjack and poker, and it's just the math and self-control.
Johnny Hughes, what a treat, man. A real pleasure. Thanks for taking time out, and thanks for being our high roller today, buddy.
Okay.